I just finished a pack of really boring animations, but that's okay. They were supposed to be. The entire reason I got into making 3D animations was because I wanted to make concert visuals. And this year we've seen a huge rise in 3D being on that stage with guys like Excision and Anima making some pretty wild visuals for their shows. At this point, I'm sure everyone's seen this clip of this crazy robot animation being time-coded with the visuals. It was extremely viral, but that also created a pretty big shift in visuals on the stage for quite a while. Now, I've been paying attention to concert visuals for a really long time, and there is still a constant through line of what artists need for their stage. Now, at the very basic level, an LED is just a huge light that is so customizable because you can play video on it. And a lot of the times, you just need visuals that are seemingly simple compared to things like these huge LED scenes that are flat, that have color, that have movement, that have shape, that create these really interesting light scenarios. And these visuals might seem very boring and simple compared to some of these visuals that we've been seeing lately. And these visuals are the backbone to a whole show. And you, as a 3D artist or a 2D artist, have the ability to make a lot of these and make a really good income making them. Now, last week, I made a pack of animations with that in mind. These boring animations, not really boring, but comparatively, and an artist can download them and use them for their shows. And anytime I make a pack of visuals like this, I learned some cool things. So I want to show you guys how I made this pack and a lot of the really cool things I learned on this little journey. Before I go any farther in this, if you are a Blender user and you want to learn all of the animations that are part of this collection, how I made each one of them, on Patreon, there is a 1-hour breakdown of the entire collection. I got to slow down and really show you every little thing that I just don't have time for in this YouTube video. And you can get access to all of the project files and you can use them for commercial or personal work, whatever you want. Feel free to steal my ideas from the Patreon. So if you want to check that out, that is going to be linked in the description. Now, there's a series of steps that I took in order to make this look right and it actually be an efficient process. So first, I had to describe the look, what I want it to look like. Then look at stuff. Look at what other people have been doing already. Gather some inspiration, on this case, on a Pinterest board, and then I can actually start the design. After that, once we have a whole lot of things to play with, I started to refine all the animations, then added some effects to really make it feel good, and then it's ready to be sent off. So let's go through all those steps and learn some really cool things. So first, describe the look. That was pretty much the intro of this video, describing what are we looking for with these flat, very useful, interesting animations that create light moments and light things on the stage that are really necessary. Then look at stuff. I basically spent a lot of time on Instagram Reels looking at concert videos, trying to see what other people have been doing to see what works, see how they approach their visuals. When it comes to stuff like this, the wheel's already been invented. So go look at what other people are doing, seeing what they did right, and then do that, make it your own and be really creative. Next, gather inspiration. I always go to Pinterest for this. So I searched up a keyword until I found an image that I really liked. Then I can go down a rabbit hole. So my goal is to collect images that I know I can actually design and turn that into animations, or just things that can spark an idea that I can start with in Blender. All right, the actual fun part, which is designing. Let me show you some really cool stuff. All right, so this is the reference animation for like, all right, how do I make that? Let's figure that out in Blender. All right, we have a grid, pretty well subdivided. We're gonna instance our objects on that. So we have that stuff. We're gonna go ahead and set up our whole sort of texture system to actually get that movement. Now, when it comes to geometry nodes, you can actually set up your own custom mapping. Sometimes you're gonna need to stretch textures. So you can just do a really simple mapping setup, just like this with vector math, and then you can just plug that into your texture. So the phase offset is going to create our movement. So what we can do is just kind of get that texture to be really small. Something like 0.2, 0.3. And then I'm going to give it like 50 on the distortion. So we have this, and then you can just stretch the texture out. And once you play with the phase offset, you're going to get this really, really sweet movement. And then you can just put an emission material on that, loop this, and you have something perfect. The reference for this one made me go
Is there a way that I can randomize the position of a gradient on every single square? How can I randomize the position, and then we can get that to create a really, really interesting feeling? So let's build that. So instance, just a bunch of squares on a grid, and let's just go ahead and throw some data. So what we'll do is we'll get a store named attribute and just plug random data into the instances so we can get some information in the shading. We'll get a emission material, grab that, and head into the shading. So what we can do to create the gradient that's going to be on each one of these cubes is use a wave texture, because that gradient can get pretty big, just like this. We can just have it. Now it's the same gradient on all of the cubes. So what I want to do is grab that random attribute that I created in geometry nodes, and we can plug that into the rotation. So if I just go ahead and say randomize the Z, and then use a math node to say how much to randomize it, then now the gradient is in different positions on all of these, but now they're also just animating the phase at the same place on all of these. Notice that? So let's randomize that. So if I just get another multiply, use that random value on the phase. And now when we play with that, we're gonna get this random position of the gradient on every single one of my cubes, and it just creates this really, really interesting feeling, and I love it. This is literally one of my favorite ones on the pack. So when I saw this one, I thought, is there a way we can animate maybe the insetting of a square object? Ended up making this animation right here. So there's kind of the inspiration. I deviated from it quite a bit, but this shows like, hey, here's the idea, and it can spark a different direction for what we're doing. All right, so I'm gonna instance a bunch of grids within a bigger grid, something like this. So now what I wanna do is inset the inside of those faces and then delete them. One really easy way to do that is to get an extrude mesh and just bring that offset to 0. And then go ahead and you can scale the elements and just say, hey, scale only the top elements. So now we have this. Then we can say, okay, delete those middle ones. Tell it delete the faces and delete only those top sections. And now we have the middle deleted. Now we need to first realize our instances, then we can start randomizing all of these guys. So what we can do is randomize the scale. So right now, if you just play with the phase offset, it's gonna be doing that just in a really simple line. So what you can do is just bring that texture down until you start to sort of see this discernible line amongst the wave, and then you can just go ahead and distort it. And then you can play with the offset to sort of go from left to right, and then see how it kind of fully closes. You can control the full inset with the map range, and then you can just play with that offset from right to left and maybe bring that distortion down a little bit. Then of course, all you need is an emission material on these guys, and you're set with a really, really cool animation loop just right off the bat, super quickly. All right, when I saw this reference, I knew I had to make it. It's simple, but it's really cool. And you can see it's got some texture, so throwing some kind of CRT texture on it will work really, really well. Again, with all of these scenes, we're just starting out with some type of grid. This time we're gonna start with a mesh line, and we just gotta tell that mesh line to just lay flat on the ground. I'm gonna go with 20 on the count. So we'll decide how wide we want these guys to be, something like that, and then we'll bring them all together. So just like the animation earlier, what we can do is get the shading to recognize some randomness, or to be able to recognize the instances here. So we'll give it just a random value setup and just plug a random value into the attribute so that we can recognize the wave that we're about to throw on it. So we'll get a simple emission that we can put into the set material node. So we can plug a wave into a color ramp, switch that over to Y, and then once we scale this up, you can see we start to have the beginning of this animation. But obviously, I want to randomize the position of this wave texture on every single one of these instances. So we can grab that attribute, plug it into the value, and then we can just do a multiply add function like we just did. And then we can randomize their position. And of course, you know, this is kind of boring. So what we can actually do is get another whole wave texture and plug that right in front of the attribute. And then when we play with the offset, it's just gonna animate super randomly, just like that. And then you could just animate that in a loop, give it a bunch of frames, and then change it from sine to saw. Play with that color ramp till it looks really nice. Maybe even go ahead and flip the color ramp. And then now you have something really, really cool. Super flat, has a nice gradient, animates nicely, animates in a perfect loop, and it's just such an awesome asset to use.
All the animations are rendered out. They're still black and white and they're cool. They can just be like that and you can give that to people and they can change it within the server that they're using. I wanted to add a little bit more spice to them, so I threw all of the visuals in After Effects and I created a very quick CRT kind of emulator to give them just this kind of lived in vintage feel, so that any artist that doesn't have a visuals guy or doesn't have the software to change the color, you have something good to start with now. So in Blender, I rendered out each of them 4K PNG sequence, ran that through After Effects and exported it as a 4K ProRes 4444 codec. So now that I'm done, I'm just gonna design a really quick cover image for the product. And then once it's ready, we can put that up online. I like to use Gumroad. You can use whatever you want. And there you go. You've created a product as an artist and maybe put some money in your pocket throughout the year as other VJs and artists might be searching for these things. So there you go. I made a bunch of boring animations. Are they boring? Not really, but if you compare them to other stuff, they can feel kind of boring, but they're so necessary. And I promise you, artists are needing these things and there's still a lot of visuals out there that suck and you can make some really cool stuff. So hopefully this inspired you. Hopefully you can go on and make your own pack of visuals like this. It's really cool. Feel free to steal my ideas. I like to give this stuff away. On Patreon, of course, you can grab all of the project files and check out that long tutorial for all of these if you want to check it out, linked in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next one.